Hello, everybody. Hi, this is me. Greg Valentine. I am here. I just dropped my light. Hold on a second. Oh, goodness. All right, I am here. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I have my headphones in my ears. And let's see, I'll probably just put my headphone down for a second. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. Let me get this little light out of the way. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. One, today I was in the process of let me get away from this light. This light is right on my. I aim this way. I was in the process of talking about some deep conversation I had today. Another light. See, it's really a rare opportunity when you get a chance to be able to talk in New York City and not have too much noise. All you have is the airplanes above, and you have the airplanes above, and you have just pretty much night and that people walking around, which is really cool. So here am I, going live pretty much. One of the things I wanted to talk about was at lunch today, I had an opportunity to talk to one of my friends, coworkers, and what we were talking about was about the aspect of you know, I was sharing with him about like some things I've been learning. I've been listening to some of the philosophers and stuff, and different philosophers have been talking about different things in terms of like how to deal with and how to cope with life. I'm a Christian. I'm a born again Christian. I've been a Christian since I was 7 years old. What I used to do was I used to study the Bible and use those arguments and fight with people with the scripture. And incidentally, I learned how to use the Bible, learned the Bible a lot because, you want to know the whole context. So it's kind of one of those things where the more you study it, the more, you learn the context. Finally, you know the whole story. So when I went to Bible school, when I was about, 17, 16, 17, going to Bible school. So I came to know Jesus at 7, 10 years later, going to Bible school at 17. And I got a chance to get really fine-tuned. But before that, my parents, we used to read the Bible a lot. And so we had a lot of scriptures that we would share, a lot of Bible we'd know. And so, anyway, so what happens is my coping mechanism is to turn to God whenever I'm overwhelmed, whenever I'm stressed out, or whenever I'm, just don't know what to do. I turn to God, I turn to Lord Jesus Christ. He's my Savior, and He's the one down the cross for my sins. And so what happens is, just knowing that He did that for me, He's my anchor. One of the things that I find interesting, is that I was listening to this thing of this philosophy, and he said about how there's they talk about Nietzsche, Nietzsche, Nietzsche. I'm not pronouncing his name properly. Nietzsche, yes, Nietzsche. And so, in the case of Nietzsche, there's had a thing about psychological and emotional mechanisms to cope with existence. I talked about it. Also, a gentleman named Peter Zapfa, and talked about how consciousness itself is a curse. How we on the evolutionary scale, quote unquote evolutionary, because I don't believe we're evolutionary. I believe God created us, complete and total of what we are. And so what happens is that when He made us fully functional, fully wise. He made Adam and Eve very smart. He made the smartest people on the earth were Adam and Eve, and He gave them the ultimate decision to make. So just obey me and live. And they chose to disobey Him and brought death to us all. And pretty much even told them the consequences. If you do this, you're going to die. And the death versus spiritual death. And they understood this. But they started blaming each other because they knew how bad it was. But they didn't blame each other or see the future to be able to warn themselves what was coming down the pike. Anyway, some of the coping mechanisms we talked about was about isolation. That whenever people try to deal with the problems of the world, they would get isolated. That means they kind of get alone by themselves. They try to limit what they see, hear, and influence by. The other one is they tend to anchor in things they hold on to and they believe in. And that way, what they do is that they just kind of cling to things that are just, that when they're young, they cling to their home, their neighborhood, their sports team, whatever. And I'm here at the City Field. And City Field, and behind me is the, they're going to have the U.S. Open. Next thing you have also is the distraction. And so when people get overwhelmed, they either deal with isolation, they deal with anchoring, where they anchor to things that they know, the political party, or to deal with their abilities and their strength or their achievements in life, or they go to a distraction where they get bombarded with so much pleasures and things like that that they can't really see what's going on anymore. So what happens is, there's one more thing called sublimation. And sublimation is one of those things where you take all that you've seen. You take all the negative, you've seen the isolation, you've been alone for a while. You take the next part where you have the isolation for a while, you have the anchoring where you take all the stuff you've learned, and then also the part where you have your distraction, and then from there what you do is that you you turn into something, some kind of artwork, you know? And, you know, I was thinking about that, and so I was so happy to think about that. I started sharing with one of my coworkers, you know, about the situation, about this, and I couldn't remember all the words, so I had to kind of listen to this thing 3 more times on YouTube, and it's pretty much I can't remember the name right now. It's like, my brain is just, oh my goodness. So, well, anyway, so I've been listening to them, and so what happened, I went over and I started sharing with my coworker, and I said to him about, like, you know, the aspect of, this is so interesting, people have to deal with coping mechanisms. So we started talking, and he got talking to about, you know, how if given the chance, you know, he'd want to go back to Africa, you know? And so I said, why would you want to go back to Africa? He says, you know, talk about the slave trade and things like that. And I said about, you know, kind of like, you know, now, what do we do now? Because these things might be, and we have slave mentality, and people kind of go back to slave mentality and things like that. But what are we going to do in terms of, like, you know, now? Well, his thought was that, he said, you know, if he can go back to Africa now, he would love to go back. You know, I said, well, where would you go? You know, you're not even sure where you're from. He said, well, there's ways to find out. I could take my DNA and all that stuff and find it. I said, well, okay, well, but you would be an outsider. You know, no matter how much, like, my home country is Dominica. When I went back one time when I was 12 years old, I'll never forgot that one of the kids, they said to me, it's like, oh, you know, I was born there in Dominica, and I came to the United States. And so being born there, you know, and I lived in New York City for like 12 years of my life at that point. When I went back to camp, they were like, they called me a fat American, you know? They called me a fat American. And so, and I didn't have anything with the culture. So it's kind of like the more you're away, that your diversity, you bring something different when you go to something that's different from you. So the thing is that the best thing is kind of do something homogeneous, go to something that's the same, as opposed to going to something that's different, you know? You have a scenario where it's like, let's see, hope my battery's still working. Okay, you have a scenario where it's like, I like the word scenario, just love the word. So you have this thing where, you know, I guess I'm getting to my point. You're pretty much listening to this. So, but the point is I'm trying to get to is that he was talking about, like, how if given the opportunity to go back to Africa, he would go back. I said, where to? He said, not sure where, but, you know, he said he would find out where by DNA. I said, what would you do when you get there? He said, I'd just try and, you know, forget everything that I knew from here and go back and start living over there. And I said, well, you know, if you did that, you'd have to, the things that made you you is things you have to forget. It's kind of like going back in time, go back to the future thing, and like getting rid of your grandfather or something. Everything that made you got rid of, you would cease to exist. You just wouldn't exist, you know. And that's more like metaphysical, but, you know, you would cease to exist. So what would you do? You would come to the culture, and you'd be a hybrid. You'd be a monster to the culture that you're trying to go to. You can't go back in time and try and make something different. You have to actually go from there and keep going. So you have the scenario where it's like, like the word scenario, I keep saying it. And then so what happens is I'm going to put situation, try situation. I'll try that instead, okay? Situation. You'd have the situation where you'd be faced with being a hybrid. You would not belong. And anything you'd bring would be a different set of culture. And eventually you'd become, you know, an outcast. Or you'd be an outcast with playing the inside and changing things. You know, whatever you study, you change. So the question was about, like, after that, he said, well, if I could find a tribe or a group of people that didn't know anything that I could actually just, you know, affiliate with, that I could become, you know, friends with, or I could learn under, then that would be great. Well, then I said, well, in that case, you know, you'd have to, in a sense, probably take some kind of medicine or something and be able to forget everything you know and forget even your name and start off as a baby. The only way for you to be safe and secure, you'd be like a Alita battle angel or something, where you come in and you have no idea who you are. And over the course of history, you just start remembering and all that, and then you figure out who you were until somebody told you what you were. You know, it'd be like a newborn baby with no information. But so, you sure you want to do that? How would you know that's better? Because I mean, the things that make you what you are is what makes you different. So if you take away you take away your pain and your suffering and all your affliction and things you go through, you know, you cease to be what you are. You become something else. So if you have a life devoid of pain and suffering and anguish, and a life devoid of all kind of things, you know. You were moved out of here, United States, and you go to any kind of African country, you know, first you'd be an outcast because they wouldn't know what you are. They'd have to season you and watch you for a while. Then after that, you'd be either accepted, and you'd have to start at the bottom. You'd be like the dude in Avatar, you know, starts off like as a Navi, and he starts off like, you know, doesn't know anything, to becoming like one of the chieftains, you know. But he has to work his way up there. And so how he did it was that he brought all his different skills and his understanding to do that. It wasn't just, you know, a clean slate starting fresh. He was already a military person, and he had military training, and he had his mindset and all the stuff he learned. So he was just kind of like a person going in there with something. So my thought was, I started thinking about how intense that would be. That if he was to go, you'd have to learn the language. He's saying that the best thing you'd have to do, you have to learn the language and then start afresh, learning the people. And I said, that sounds great and everything, but then you would be at a severe disadvantage because you'd have the culture, you'd have people trying to take advantage of you, and it says, and the furthermore primitive you'd go back in time, you'd become more advanced because you'd know stuff that they wouldn't know. You'd be like a witch or a warlock or something. You'd know something. The first thing is like, and he said, well, you'd have to totally accept their culture. I said, you couldn't totally accept their culture. If you sat there and you saw the cow plop all kind of feces into the water, you're gonna sit there and drink it because the culture is doing that? No, you'd be like, no way, I ain't drinking that. There's dysentery in that water. There's E. coli in that water. There's Giardia in that water. There's tapeworm in that water. There's no way I'm drinking that stuff, Now, for you to actually go and do that knowingly, as soon as you stop doing that, you try to teach them, they would say, where'd you learn this information from? He says, I know it from somewhere else, from higher intelligence or whatever. And as soon as you said that, they'd be like, oh, burn the witch. They would burn you because that would happen. They would put you to death because you would come from outside their thing and you had to compete with their paganism. You have to deal with all their whatever. We always think that the tribe system is always better than the system that we have now. But the truth of the matter is that whatever we have now is similar to the tribe system, and it's very much like how they do it. It's like, a whole, again, with the isolationism, people kind of keep to themselves when they get overwhelmed with this reality of life, or they start anchoring, they kind of cling to the things that they hold on to. Like I know many people, they cling to like their, church situation, or they cling to their politics, or they cling to their favorite music or something, just to help them cope, or they get the bottle, they get the booze, and they start drinking that when they get overwhelmed, And then the other one is that pretty much you start distracting themselves. That's just distraction. Let's go watch some more movies, or let's go watch some more TV, or let's go watch some things here and there. And so what happens is that, when you do all that, what ends up happening is that you are faced with not dealing with reality. So the one sublimation was actually a really good idea for me because it said about taking in all the bad and the good and trying to make something out of it. I remember back in Bible school we had a thing we talked about how if you copy somebody exactly, you are plagiarizing them. If you take something completely from yourself, then you are an isolated source, right? But if you take, and so for example, you copy completely like ants. Ants don't make anything. Ants just take stuff. Ants are a pack of thieves, okay? Ants don't make, they just take. So they don't make their own honey. They don't make anything like that. But I kind of gave it away. Bees make honey. So for example, bees will take what they have. They'll take what they have and they will make honey from it. And so they'll take a little bit of flour, and they go in and take flour, a little bit of their own spit, and then they turn that into honey. So bee spit, yes, is honey, but for the most part, though, what it turns into is that it's something that they take a little bit of themselves, they get something from outside, and they make it. Whereas, so you have ants who don't make anything. So the thing is, when you come to a situation about life, you have to be able to take information and then be able to make something from it, like a whole, bunch of different things. So for the most part, it's like one of those things where you have to interpret and, and spit it out and interpret it, take it back in and interpret it and look it over and bounce off a few people in order for you to get an idea. So that's what kind of art comes down to. Art becomes one of those things where when you design art or you do artwork and stuff, it shows that you have the ability to make something that's unique, You make something that's unique, and you make something that's unique and your interpretation of the world. It's like I look back to my dinosaur stories that I put on Instagram, and pretty much the stories are really good because what it does is it forces me to have to look at the current political stance and try and interpret it into a story while trying to have a semblance of a story, maintaining that. And this is kind of a long one topic story about an election, and about things that happen around the scenes of the election to make the election happen. So anyway, so back to what I was saying. So the guy said that he'd be willing to go back and go to another country and be totally immersed in the culture just so he can have the experience of being part of that culture. And I said, not I said the fox, because what happens, I think that if you do that, you are putting yourself in a situation of, situation. Yeah, situation. It's a situation. All right, in a situation where you are limiting your abilities. So you'd have to forsake, let's say, medicine and your philosophy and your ideology and your thought process and all the things you've learned and all your bravado and all your understanding of stuff, just so you can be part of a culture that you know nothing about, because you think it's being better. I disagree with that tremendously because I feel as though the whole idea of it is that you are ceasing to be what you are to try and be something that you're not. So what we need to go here from there is to be able to take from the culture that's presented to us, the cultures that is presented to us, and then what we do from there is that we have to interpret and make it better from where we are. Not go back in time and try to recreate the Garden of Eden. We can't really go back and do that. We don't have what it takes. It's like the situation in the Garden of Eden. I have to walk, because if I try to ride down this hill trying to walk, I'm just gonna die. So I'll just have to walk down this ramp, get myself home. But for the most part, what I was trying to say is that when you have these situations where you're faced with dealing with all kind of, you have to go back in time. You can't go back in time. You have to go forward in time. There's no time travel back in time, because you can't go back and change. You can only go forward and learn from where you are. So that's kind of where it's at, in terms of life itself. So that's pretty much how these things work. You can't really go back and change things in the past. You have to go into the future and keep working from your present. And so from there is how you make things better. There's how you change the world. That's how life is different. All right, so I just want to share that with you. Thank you so much for listening. I know that these things are long, but it also is kind of cool to be able to just talk and have no, New York City, it's like Queens, New York. And being able to just be able to talk and, have a dialogue as I'm talking to my phone, just listening. I hope it all went through, because it's kind of a bummer to do all this recording and for my sound to be off or something, or sound to be too low and not even knowing about it. But hopefully it isn't, and hopefully it is. And, just pretty much as I'm walking, I'm going to get riding soon. So I'm going to get off at this ramp, get riding again. So I'll be able to talk to you better. Well, we're going to cross over in front of City Field. I'll be able to do that. So I just want to say a couple of things. Well, what else is there? There's been a lot of things in the news lately. And, I'll say that for another topic. But I just want to say that the news is crazy. I just can't stand the news anymore. It just makes my head spin. It's like there's so much stuff in the news, and if you try and listen to everything that's on the news, what will eventually happen is that you just can't believe anything, or you just become isolated, I guess. Isolated, or you become anchored in the thought process. Oh goodness, it's all this water. I gotta jump over this water real quick. Oh goodness, whatever this water is. Don't want to touch that. Okay. Well, whatever that was really gross. Jumped over that. First, I hadn't fallen it. Okay, so let me get my bike on and I'm gonna go. So thank you so much for listening. I'll do a little treat for you. I'll bring you right in front of City Field again, and then I'll stop. Okay? Watch this. Booyah, booyah. All right, let's go. So, it's kind of adventure in my life. Go into the park, and here we are. Right in front of City Field, because it's always a cool thing. Be able to see the cool City Field at night. City Field at night. Here it is. All right, I'm gonna turn around so you can see. There you are, City Field at night. Let me get down there. Yeah, City Field. At night. Do a little more of a turn so you can see it a little better. I'm going to turn my back completely to it. So there we go. Woo. Yep. City Field. Rentable. City Field at night. Okay, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for listening to my rants and my conversation. My point I wanted to say in the very end of it all was that, the more I talk philosophy, the more I listen to people, the more I realize the importance and the power of Lord Jesus Christ. That, he's able to change lives, that he's changed my life, he's given me a hope and a purpose, and then not only that, he's given me eternal life based on the fact that he died for my sins on the cross, and then he also lived, so he rose again from the dead. So that makes it so awesome, because, any philosophy that you look into with man's wisdom, it always ends with the subtlety and the very abruptness of death. When Jesus conquered death and the grave, he did a wonderful thing. He gave us a hope beyond the grave. And there's everything that we're afraid of, everything, whether it's fear of roller coasters, spiders, or injury. The ultimate fear is death. And so the real question is, whether we fear, or do we fear God, and do we fear him enough to trust him? Trust what he's able to do for us. So I want to thank you all so much for listening to me. Have a good night, and God bless. Look at the City Field one more time. City Field, right there, City Field. All right, good night and good night.